Welcome to the Performance Formula with Jody Martins. Just before we get into the conversation, both Russell and myself realized once we're done recording that it's better that this conversation is split into two separate conversations. This, however, is the first part. Enjoy listening in. So Russell, new year. We took a little bit of a break through December. I hope you had a good break. I've certainly had a good rest and really looking forward to get cracking again with you on these spirited cricket conversations. Maybe just to remind everybody, the conversations we've had so far, this is the fifth one in the series. Firstly, we spoke about that the spirit of cricket is there's a good news factor to it, and that it's not necessarily just to keep us morally sort of on the high ground, but there's actually good news in it. And so I want to encourage anybody that if they're following along in these conversations, that's really the place where you need to start. So if this is the first one that you get to, rewind yourself back a little bit, because these conversations sort of follow on each other. The second one was we spoke about how the spirit of cricket is actually more than just the spirit of cricket, but it's actually a metaphor for life, and how a lot what happens in the game actually gets reflected back into life. The third conversation was around sacrificing others, and how we can at times use the people around us more just for our own gain, and sort of what to do about that. And then the last one we had before we took a bit of a break was to be rescued by the spirit. So how does the spirit actually help us get away from the me, myself, and I, needy, greedy sort of mindset and attitude? And so today we're starting to shift our focus a little bit away from the individual and getting more into the team stuff, champion teaming, and in particular around a methodology, or you can probably say the word better there than I can. It's a bit of a tongue twister, but specifically around a style or a way that's different to the norm, and starting to get a little bit into the solutions of things and what that could look like for individuals. So maybe to get us started, I don't know if you've got anything to say before we get into sort of the first little bit. I see you nod your head, so I'm assuming that's a yes.
Yeah, thanks, Jody. It's been a little bit of a break, like I said, over December, like you just mentioned, and it's been a useful one because we basically through last year, the end of last year, disclose a lot of where the potential challenges and problems might stem from, right? And we looked at what could be stumbling blocks to performances. And I think now we're shifting gears, which is ideal for the new year, and trying to offer some form of a resolution, some form of remedy at the start of the year. So I think that's what's awesome about it, and also how it all integrates, into really getting this champion persona over the line in an effortless manner. And I think we alluded to it quite a bit. So I think when we start discussing from where we let off now, it's going to be quite an easier conversation to relate to, and also because it's kind of portrayed as an answer, it's probably going to be easier to listen to. But between you and I, it's always going to be some form of depth. So there will be some deeper thinking. That's just the nature of how we've been rolling. But I'm looking forward to what we break apart here.
Yeah. So to get us into this conversation, I remember us speaking maybe a little bit towards this, but we sort of left off, and it's all around this idea of desire and how we pursue goals. And I think last year in particular, you and I spent a lot of time talking about this around the South African cricket team, other series that we've done, lifting the covers, and how dangerous desire can be. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that sort of, at the start of this conversation.
Yeah, there's definitely dangers around desire, the very debilitating, elements to it. And as a result of it, if you don't look at it with intentionality, with a consciousness about it, and don't approach it in a purer fashion, it's going to cripple you. Desire is actually part of our, in a deeper sense, our nature, our human nature, that's actually a little bit darkish. It can lead to a deathly experience, as we already pointed out. And I think if we don't kind of clean it up, or we don't come in with open eyes around it, it's going to lead us to paths of astray. It leads us astray and lead us to paths of kind of sabotaging the potential of what we're after. So the main, and I think we can put some of this literature, we've been doing a little bit of research behind the scenes between you and I, right? The whole concept of wanting something, and particularly if your wants is a skew, if your wants is not purified, that wanting can lead you to actually cripple, like we said, the relationship aspect, but also the very nature of what we're targeting. So performances and things like that needs to be orientated towards a more purer desire. The guys like philosophers and anthropologists, Rene Girard was mentioned, I think, in the last thing. I'm not sure if we directly mentioned his name, but then there's subsequent modern teachers or people who wrote books about a guy called Luke Burgess, as wrote Wanting and how the mimetic desire operates in everyday life. Now, we're obviously looking at the context of sport. Now, the reason why I'm fascinated about this is that desire is actually cheerled into being the main thing, right? We actually encourage sports rivalry. We encourage like this, you versus me, and those sorts of things. And inevitably, what we're suggesting is that's one way of engaging with the game, with cricket in particular, as we're talking about now. There's one way of engaging with it, but it's not necessarily the purer or the maturer way. There are other options, but it hasn't been portrayed as such. We've just assumed that desire is, this rivalry type of concept is the only way. So if you've done the research on Rene Girard and those sorts of guys who've done some intense work in this area, you'll notice that what they say inevitably, that desire is actually like a curse almost. It creates crises, it creates conflicts, it creates scapegoating, and then it ritualizes that sort of violence, if you want to call it that, right? And I know it's a strong word to use, but essentially it's like me versus you, and then someone has to go, right? So it creates that sort of animosity. And in sport, as I said, professional sport, we actually cheerlead that and say we want that animosity. We want, I don't know, I'm thinking of Virat Kohli and the in-your-face type of style, and we kind of applaud that. But I'm not saying, for me, I don't think there's a better way to do it. We can still have excellence. We can still have ambition without the desire actually driving toward the dark side and that sort of deathly experiences. So those guys have allowed us to see that the conflict, the crises, the scapegoating, and those routine and ritualistic type of approaches can be offered a different way. We can look at it a more spirited way, a more pure, a more embracing way. It's not just in your face, cutthroat, and all of that, and mercilessly, creating misery for one another, and also we're perpetuating a form of a game that we may not want our kids to be exposed to be honest. We may want to see a better version of it. So spirited cricket, and this stems from that, call it flawed approach, which we've just brought into holistically. And I've sent you that Luke Burgess, I think this is where you can maybe comment, video where he spoke about rivalry and in particular used the metaphor, or not this metaphor, was an example actually of Ferrari, Enzo Ferrari versus Lamborghini, the owners of it, and how that's come about. So Lamborghini, at the point the rivalry started, birthing good things, but inevitably, as these guys are suggesting, it goes towards the dark side and deathly. So you need to kind of have a sense of awareness that that you're going to be tripped up if you continue down that pathway. And this is why I'm saying ultimately our human nature is for these things to take each other out, eliminate the threat of what we're targeting. And that is not the only way sport can be played. There can be a more spirited way to play. And this is what I'm hoping to discuss today with champion teaming. So the whole idea is by spirit, for love of the game, champion teaming. I mean, that's the analogy where we would like to suggest there's an option available for us.
I mean, yeah, I mean, you sent me the stuff, so I looked into it. Maybe not as thoroughly as you, but the things that stood out for me, and I think there was a very good example very recently, this me versus you thing, Sam Constas versus India versus Virat Kohli. Virat Kohli sort of walked over, bumped him. He had a, very visual reaction towards that. You can see both of them at times cheering on the crowd and getting the crowd behind them. very showboating in their behavior on the field, which then gets obviously commentators to comment about it, which divides the room. Some say, oh, they love it, this is what the game needs. Others like, that's not how the game should be. And then there's obviously the general public. So if you go on Twitter, that was all over Twitter at the time, or X or whatever it's called now officially. And so I think, like it's very clear. And to me personally, if you take someone like Sam Constas, and I'm being very specific this example, I saw some comments around that if he continues to do that, he'll actually get a bad reputation in the game. So something that is in the heat of a moment, that can be applauded as a young kid sort of standing his ground, that's brash and fearless and all the other good things that can be associated with. At the same point in time, there's this recognition that, hey, if you're going to continue with this, like, it's actually not going to be good for you in the long run. And so I think I can appreciate that as one side of this. Then the other thing that really stood out for me was how our desires are not our own. We only desire things because somebody else is showing us how to desire it. And so if you think of, say, a South African cricket team that wants to win a World Cup, it is a desire, 100%, that's spoken about, that's needed, that's desperately seeked. And there's sort of this big attachment, and you and I have gone to lengths to sort of speak to that in other places. Or if you take a batter wanting to score runs, and there's this desperate need and desire to, I must now, like, and then it doesn't come. And so the only reason we know to be like that is because somebody else is teaching us, or somebody else is showing. And that's what that mimetic means. It means we're mimicking essentially other people's desires. And I think Luke gives a good example. He says he went to Asia. In one of the videos I watched, he went to Asia, and all of a sudden there was 5 watches that got marketed and advertised in the airport, and within a couple of months or whatever, he bought himself one of those. And he sort of realized that, hang on, this is not the American culture that I grew up in, but all of a sudden I'm now trying to be Asian, or what the desires are over here. And so if you go to another place or another country, and then all of a sudden those desires become your desires. Or if you change jobs, all of a sudden there's a different path here, and people show to you. And so I think I hear what you say around desire is dangerous, but I also think there is a good side to it. And for me, at this point in time, in my understanding, is that desire can drive us, but I think there's a authenticity and a clarity needed in that it is our desire. It's not, and that desire might be completely gone from anything. It's that type of desire that if you pursue that, people laugh at you, they think you're silly, they think you, like, how would you want that in life? And I'm not saying that's a way to know, but that's sort of how it sort of sits with me at this point in time. It's normally when people go, oh geez, why is this guy doing this? Like, it's so random, it's so, maybe there's something to that. Every 11-year-old, if you ask them, do you want to be what do you want to do? They'll all say they play for South Africa. Why? Because that's what they know to say. But very few 11-year-olds will say, I play to change the world, or I play to uplift my family out of poverty, or have something unique that they bring to it. And I think that's the differentiator for me, is that you've got to find those uniquenesses. Yeah.
Yeah, you're fitting perfectly into where I was going to take this thing. So I it's a nice little entry point. I think the point you make, and I'm saying it differently, is that we have low level of desires at times that is mimicked. We see examples of this, and if it's poor examples of it, we tend to only want to have or do what we've seen our predecessors. Right? We don't know what to want. That's what Luke says, and Rene Girard and all these teachers have said. Right? We don't know what we want. We're creatures that don't understand what we want. So we look to other people for those desires. And if those examples are poor, or if they're low frequency examples, then we tend to be repetitive. And what that therefore causes is this conflict, this inevitable conflict or crisis that's going to come, because it feels like there's a limit to achieving, right? There's only one cup, there's only one trophy, only one winner. So therefore we start looking for ways to be in each other's face, and basically trying to eliminate the threat. right? So that crisis creates a scapegoating where we blame someone and we start rubbing it in their noses, or we're saying, how can we get rid of this? He's useful for the game in one way, but useless in another way. So by things that happened along the game, whether it's cheating, the sandpaper gate scenario, all these sorts of things come out as a result of being lost in these desires that we didn't know was actually driving us, but they're low-level desires. You understand? So what you're referring to is desire in itself is not necessarily the bad thing, but you have low-level desires. Those are going to lead you astray. And if you're not conscious of it, it's even worse, because you're going down a path where you don't even know you're going to hit the wall, right? And you're going to take not just yourself with you, but a few others. So it's about increasing. This is what we are suggesting, that there's an answer in increasing the level or hiring the level of frequency when you're talking about desire. Let's desire something more transcendent, something more higher, right? And this is where the spirit comes in. If you look at the spirit of the game is in itself has enough offerings to anyone who engages with its spirit. It's an inbuilt desire to do right by the spirit. And if you surrender yourself to that, now it becomes not my personal desire, but the broader transcendent desire of the game, right? And so that now becomes a higher purpose, something that's actually beyond my personal pursuit. Even what you referred to earlier, to get my family out of poverty or to play for this particular cause of changing the world. The spirit of the game is already there as an option. In actual fact, it drives all things, right, within the game. It has within itself, like we said in the preamble, in its makeup, the respectability of all, the preservation of life for all, when you surrender to the spirit, right? And that's what brings the love of the game to the fore. So it's by the spirit when you surrender to it, and for the love of the game. And that's your driver. That's the transcendent space where the higher frequency now is met. And you'll get detached because you're actually a prisoner to performance, right? If you're living under these desires, that's mimic. So you're detached and you free yourself. You're actually less of a slave now. You almost swapped into this, I'm a slave of the spirit in a way, which is a good slavery. It's a freeing slave. It's a sense of liberation that comes of it because you want to do this. And it's something that's going to benefit not just yourself, but also future generations and the colleagues and the people that your opponents, whoever in the game, it's going to be a beneficial thing. It's a win-win-win scenario. And we're all looking for this win, but we're looking for this win at the expense of another. But when you surrender to the spirit, everyone wins, even though one is crowned as a champion and the other maybe not at this point in time. But everyone walks away winners when you flow in the spirit of the game. So that's why I suggest that desire has to be looked at in a conscious fashion, and people need to be awoken to the fact that desire is actually driving them consciously or subconsciously. And there are dangers that are on each side of it, unless they got given an option to surrender to higher desires, which is going to safeguard them from falling along the side of the road type of thing. And this is why we're doing what we're doing. You're not going to get champion teaming, right? The teaming of champions, unless you first start by the spirit for the love of the game. And then we can consider how we're going to work amicably with each other. Because the other angle, like we just said, we're going to constantly have conflict, even within team spaces, in change rooms, with each other, because of the sense of free agency that makes it even more pronounced, right? I'm just coming here to cash in, to make money for myself and then go. So I'm not really concerned about teaming. But if you forego it and you go by the spirit for the love of the game, it doesn't matter who's in your team, you'll be able to be doing champion teaming. And that's a verb, by the way. So at any point, you can come into a mature setup and you are there as a servant of the game to actually create excellence where you are with whoever you are with. And that creates pure desire that has beautiful outcomes, because both you will have a sense of ownership that's both going to be a participatory ownership as well as a committed ownership when you're coming from those spaces, which is often not what you can assess when it comes to call it the shallow desires, the desires of my own self, me, myself, and I, me versus you, all those sorts of things. So that's the impending, or the kind of the what we spoke about, the good news of spirited cricket. It brings life where we didn't know that we were operating based on deathly or dark spaces. That was like, look at what's happening in terms of cricket around the world, there are some beautiful expressions of the game. But if you don't flow by the spirit, which I'm basically putting to you, that not a lot of people are awoken to this sort of reality. If they were, it's going to be even more magnificent if they were to have this as part of their arsenal of options, right? And if we got so much extravagance already, if we were just to lean slightly and experiment with this and lean with open-heartedness towards the spirit, the love of the game, and the servant-hearted nature of the game, it's going to expand exponentially. It's going to be an evolution of the game like no other. And this is what the offering really is. This is why it's such good news or great news. And I think you referred to it about, I'm just trying to get your wording right. How can I be, is it extraordinary great, or I'm not sure the terminology you use. If you can recall, extravagantly.
I normally say become insanely good when
Insanely
it comes
good.
to become insanely good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my suggestion is that insanely good only happens when you surrendered your desires in the bigger scheme of things. It allows you to maximize your potential in the purer fashion, mature fashion.
Yeah. I have two thoughts. I mean, I love everything you say there. I have two thoughts that I want to maybe just say, and this is for the benefit of the listener, because as I'm hearing you speak, I'm realizing we're speaking, but we're maybe not making a part of this very clear, right? That we speak about this idea of desire, and I'm going to say things that both of you and I have said in the conversation, but maybe just structure it in order, if that's okay, just for a moment. So we talk about the idea of desire, and you spoke about there being toxic or low level desires. So if we think of that, that would be the type of desire that creates for me that needy, desperate prisoner attached to the thing that you want. So I want to become a world-class cricketer, but I'm desiring it in such a way that over a period of time, it actually makes me less of myself. It does not allow me to express myself freely. Now, I agree with you. So many cricketers are in that space, like so many cricketers are in that space, down in the dumps, feeling miserable about themselves, low confidence, a lot of doubt. They play from this. They pray from this place where they've got these desires, but the experience that desire is creating is one of misery. Then there's the type of desires that I referenced earlier, like the 11-year-old, which is very conventional, right? So it's the type of desire that everybody wants that. There's nothing extraordinary about it. It's like if you ask any cricketer what they want to achieve, I want to become a professional. Okay, great. That's not going to do much for you from a performance or expression point of view, and definitely not from a team sort of space point of view. And then you get the sort of next level, and there's maybe levels in between these, but I'm oversimplifying it, right? Then there's this level at the top, which you and I are speaking about in this conversation. I might have different words for it at times, but I like this idea of the spirit of cricket in these conversations, that is sort of a higher level that you can play for. And in terms of meaning making, it's very much similar sort of levels. And that top level, we would normally look at it and go and say it's normally the meanings we assign to things that go beyond self. So it's even transcending self in some way. And so this analogy of playing from the spirit, for me, as you described it there, sort of hits that beautifully. I'm not playing for my own, and I think in the previous conversations we've sort of unpacked this, so I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I'm not playing just for my own benefit. I'm playing for the love of the game, for the spirit. I thought to maybe just give it a bit of a structure like that, so that people can so it's not these loose things that sit around, but there's actually a path that you can be on, and you can say, oh well, shucks, I'm actually okay, no wait, I'm there, or hey, I'm actually playing from that space at the top. And very few people play from that. I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. Now I know that you're sort of in this conversation, you want to get a little bit into the soft skills and how this could be a bit of a revolution. Maybe just chat on that a little bit.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump into the soft skills as you just rightly pointing out. I just want to make one comment on what you just said in terms of the reframing or restructuring it. Right. I think when you operate under that lower level of desires, you often become unknowingly at times a taker, someone who's seeking life and taking life for himself, right? And you operate basically you're operating in the wants. What do I want? And so it becomes that neediness that you're talking about. And all you're ever going to have is that sense of neediness. You're never going to feel fulfilled. You're going to constantly have this hunger and drive, and you're going to double up and you're going to get frustrated and annoyed. So, wanting is the thing that you're constantly going to get to experience, not the thing that you're desiring. You're just going to experience
Yes.
wanting.
Yeah.
So, and then the other aspect of that, too, by the way, whether you're a youngster or professional, it's actually worse when you're professional, is the will, the self will, the I need to be working hard, I need to be slaving away, I need to be workforce, whatever it is. My will is driving, right, driving behind the wheel, so to speak, and my will is going to force this thing into manifestation, into realness, into my accomplishment. And that those both of those two things are from the orientation of taking, of being a taker, of looking for life and never ever feeling fulfilled, because you're gonna get burnt out. In the case of a Heinrich Larsen or whoever, you have all the forms of capacity and talent and capabilities, but because will is behind it, your own self will, you're gonna get burnt out, and you're going to feel like a taker, just benefiting yourself and nothing transcendent, right? Nothing beyond evolve. And lastly, the converse of that is a giver, right? If you want to be a giver, i.e., a servant of the game, you're now coming from a space of already being fulfilled, already feeling the game has given you so much. You need to give back to the game, even whilst you're still busy involved in the game. So you're coming from a space of, I have so much already. I'm so grateful already. I am already accomplished. And I just want to give more of myself to the game while I can. So you're coming from the I have and the I am. And this is where are constantly referring to about being a winner first. I am a winner. I have a winning, accomplishment or sense of who I am. And that's what I'm offering or expressing or personifying to the game. So I'm a giver of life, not something that's taking from the game, right? And therefore you get those two analogies at play. So this is what we are talking about, the transcendent, when you're flowing in the spirit. And I just want to emphasize what you just said. Now, the reason why I mentioned that as backdrop to answer you, what you said, and secondly, what you're referring to with soft skills. These are soft skill elements that are often ignored. In actual fact, we constantly relegated to nothing, saying that it doesn't matter. It's just casual banter or casual talk. That's not really coincidental in any way or have any impact in any way. In essence, it's the core of what life stems from. Every single time if you don't respect the soft skills or undermine the soft skills, it's going to be to your detriment. It's going to come back in some shape and form, and what we often refer to as mother cricket, humbling you to pay attention to the soft skills, right? It's going to come back because it's part and parcel of what life's about, right? And we need to give cognizance to the soft skills, not just the hard skills. Otherwise, you just become this crusty outward expression of things that got no heart. You got no real sense of humanity to you, right? So you have to pay attention to the soft skills. So for me, the way I see the game globally going towards almost ignoring or relegating the soft skills to the background. And we tend to put entertainment, a lot of marketing gimmicks, a lot of showy goodies on the outside, and we tend to ignore the sincerity of soft skills or the impact of it. And yet it's still the driver. It's still apparently there, underlining. It's just that it'll go to the darker side. You mentioned the scenario earlier, the Virat Kohli incident, right? In Australia now. Those are soft skills playing itself out. And these guys potentially are not going to learn the lessons of the importance of soft skills because they've been through a lot of scarring, right? With these, I'm talking about the Australians now. With being egotistical, with ball scratching, the sandpaper gate and those sorts of things. Then they did a rehash and look back at ethics and morality and all those sorts of things. That's fine, the Australian way. But then it goes back out of the window again with elements like this, because in their backyard, they're a different animal now all of a sudden. And obviously you have India pushing their chest out to some extent, wanting to express who they are. Those are all soft skills. And yet those things are not heightened as important. We almost applaud it sometimes through commentators who say, oh, we love that. We want to see more of that. And then it's all in the name of entertainment, right? Those things can be very crippling. I wanted to just touch on something quickly. I've read in the light of drawing that whole aspect of desire, which is a soft skill, and how it stems through with the spirit as a remedy or a rescuing aspect. I heard a true story of this third generation chef in France, right? And he, based on my mimic desire, he was told that in order for success, a measurement or metric of success, it was to get a Michelin star, right? And once you get your first, then you go for your second and potentially your third. And that's going to be a measurement of successes or of performances, of accomplishment. And this was put down from, like you said, the third generation. So this was his predecessors, his father, his grandfather, and so forth. And eventually he came to this realization or awakening to the soft skills. Why is that the measurement of success? He asked himself, right, in reflection and contemplation. Is that really a measurement of success? Isn't maybe the full, people coming through my doors, the engagement with the crowd, with my normal customers, isn't that maybe the more of a sort of wholehearted measurement of success more important than having the star, right? The Michelin star. So this is a true story, as I said, and he reevaluated this and actually decided that he's going to pull away from the race towards competing for this Michelin star, because it was like an annual thing or something, right? And he notified the Michelin organization, don't bother to come and pursue me as one who's seeking after this accreditation, right? This endorsement. And they had a problem with this because it threatens their whole entity, their whole, I don't know how you phrase it, but because if this guy who was such an important chef in that area was choosing not to be a part of it, to detach, then it threatens their whole livelihood, their whole system, right? Because some others might follow the same, because he's creating a different form of mimicry now. Oh no, you can actually detach and not actually go for this as an accolade, right? So it's the same thing. The league is now threatened, as a result of it. So we blindedly go into certain things. Now, I'm not saying that because we want to question whether we should be going for a trophy or not. I'm saying be clear on why you're going for what you're going for. The reason why that particular chef decided, because he saw other forms of metrics to be more valuable based on his own values. And he decided to take ownership of those desires and lift the lid somewhat. And he said, I don't need to be crippling my own family, putting added pressure and burdens on myself, being miserable, creating misery, fights and whatever with everyone. If you watch the movie Burnt, you'll see an example of this. It's a clear example of it. And those rivalries don't have to persist. So you just redefine it. You find a transcendent way where you hit it and you say, it doesn't matter to me anymore. I'm choosing differently. And that's when you start operating differently and the game changes for everyone, right? Because now people want to copy you as a new example. Now we are putting this option out there, who in our minds might be the first to say, let's do a soft skills revolution. Let's really look at things contemplatively, introspectively, and let's be one of the first to put this out there as an option so that we can pioneer a new pathway. Because then we're creating an example. And it's not actually going to point back to us, to be honest. It's going to point back to the spirit of the game, the love of the game, the purest sense. Because once you point it to yourself, then you become this savior of the game. And none of us can be that, right?
Yeah.
So it really is the spirit of the game. So, but who's going to go first? That's the key, because there definitely is an option. Once you understand how these soft skills play itself out and you choose a different experience of these soft skills, you'll have a different outcome. That can be portrayed for generations to come. And that's why these soft skills is what I highlighted in the ebook, the Champion Teaming ebook.
It was great having you here for the first part of this conversation. Remember to scroll through whichever app you're listening to the podcast to. Find the second part where we chat a little bit more about the 10 myths of champion teaming.